ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon or good morning or good night, depending on where you are. Since the event on sustainable agriculture to feed the African continent is also, we have attendees online, attending virtually. So depending on where they are, so this is why I said afternoon, night, morning, or good evening here. I'll be the moderator of the session. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mustafa El-Boussini. I'm a professor at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. And also I'm program lead of Biodiversity and Plant Sciences program. Just a little bit of my, biography. I'm an entomologist by training. Worked at the National Institute of Agronomic Research for a few years before joining the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, ICARDA. At that time, the headquarters was in Aleppo, Syria, but because of the political problems there, we had to move to, basically we had to decentralize the center. And then I moved with a group of us to Morocco. And then early 2021, I joined Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. So our session, of course, big welcome to those that are attending with us. Then, of course, those that are attending virtually. So our session on sustainable agriculture to feed the African continent is co-organized by Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, UM6P, and its major and strategic partner, OCP. OCP is the world leading fertilizer company. This discussion we'll have today is part of so many other events that have happened really for the last few months, and also during this week, which is the week of food, agriculture, and livelihood. So there are other events happening right now at the Expo Center and somewhere else. So our session is also a continuation of the UN efforts and the discussion on food systems transformation. I'm referring here to the UN Food Summit held in New York last September. This summit identified 5 major action areas, including nourish all people, which led to action like food is never waste coalition and the healthy diet from sustainable food system for children and all coalition. And then there was another action, boost nature-based solutions of production. This saw different multi-stakeholder commitment, including the agroecology coalition. In his statement at this summit, the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, said, I'm quoting here, we must build a world where healthy and nutritious food is available and affordable for everyone, everywhere. He also stated, it is possible to feed a growing global population while also safeguarding our environment, basically natural resources. He also continued this stated, it takes sustainable consumption and production methods and nature-based solution. Quote, and the quote here. However, since our session is talking about really Africa, so it would be nice to have our discussion around some benchmarks. And this would be in relation to the Malabo Declaration made at the African Union Summit, June 2014, where there was a commitment to end hunger in Africa by 2025 through the following actions: sustainable and reliable production and access to quality and affordable inputs. 2, supply of appropriate knowledge, information, and skills to users. 3, efficient and effective water management system, notably through irrigation. 4th one, suitable, reliable, and affordable mechanization and energy supplies, etc. So, the big question one should ask, where does Africa stand now from achieving these targets and objectives? I'm personally looking forward to discussing this very important topic on sustainable agriculture to feed the African continent. And of course, I'm so excited to moderate this session with a great panel, which I will be introducing shortly. Now, before going to the next, which is the video of Mohammed VI Polytechnic, a short video, by the way, I would like to just let you know about the agenda of because those that are attending, of course, here with us, we'll have about 30 minutes or so at the end for their questions, and also those that are attending virtually, would like them to post their questions through the chat window. And we have people that will bring me the questions to ask to the panel. And now we'll go to, I'm inviting you to watch a short video of UM6P of Mohammed VI University, Polytechnic University.
In 2017, a new research and innovation university was inaugurated here in Morocco. Designed from the outset to be an ecosystem for innovation, research, and entrepreneurship, the first of its kind to be built in Africa. A next-generation university with 5 founding principles: promoting research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, developing skills and knowledge, bringing forth a new generation of competent leaders, developing sustainable partnerships, sharing the values of social responsibility and sustainable development, attracting many of the best minds from Africa and across the world to its main campus here in Ben Guir, 50 kilometers from Marrakesh. Mohammed VI Polytechnic University has a forward-looking approach to research and education, fully focused on innovation, experimentation, and the pursuit of excellence, with an ethos of learning by doing. PhD students and professors work together as part of a unique entrepreneurial culture, developing pertinent research projects critical to helping Africa realize its potential, with experimentation at the heart of education, starting research in small laboratories before scaling up to full-size experimentation in our living labs. Such as the experimental farms to test new methods in agriculture and fertilization. Making ideas grow and incubate in the innovation and entrepreneurship platform with a network of mentors, coaches, and numerous scale-up opportunities. Tackling the challenges of education in Africa is a core principle of the university by being close to policymakers while being anchored in academic analysis and knowledge. The university focuses on bringing concrete answers to the population's needs. The Digital Learning Lab develops digital modes of education, including massive open online courses, widening the reach of education and knowledge. The university aims to bring forth a new generation of environmentally conscious, competent leaders, offering scholarships to the best students from remote areas, being socially inclusive, giving a chance to everybody to succeed. The university is connected to a global network of academic and research institutions, while also developing partnerships with public institutions and industry, collaborating in R&D, continuous education, and knowledge transfer. Revitalizing agriculture in Africa is a challenge not only for the people of Africa, but for the people of an ever-growing world. By bringing humanities and technology sciences to the continent, and by educating the next generation of competent leaders, Mohammed VI Polytechnic University brings a solid contribution to Africa's sustainable development. Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, nurturing today's talent, impacting tomorrow's Africa.
And now we'll start our questions to our panelists. And I will start with Professor Rashid Siraj. And Dr. Siraj is an agronomist with extensive experience in different parts of the world. In Morocco, at Qadi Iyad University, where he started, at France, USA. He moved to several CGIAR centers. CGIAR, this is the Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research. There are 15 international centers, so that for those that do not know CGIAR centers. And then also he was at the CGIAR Science Council, then moved to FAO before joining the University, Mohammed VI Polytechnic University as a professor and director of the strategy. My first question to you, Dr. Rashid. So what are really the key constraints of sustainable agriculture and food security in Africa? And what are really the solutions for this key constraint? Please go ahead, Dr. Rashid.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mustafa. And well, of course, this is a very broad question. Let me pick it up where you started, the Malabo Declaration. I think we were in several panels this morning listening about security, food security issues and agriculture in Africa. We don't hear anymore almost about Malabo. But I think we need to go back to it because in 2014, I wasn't personally in Malabo, but I was a year afterwards in Maputo and following up. This has set basically the policy agenda at the continental level to put agriculture transformation in the middle of the African agenda. And this is really crucial because the continent, if it has to face all the challenges coming up in terms of feeding itself, had to put some of the targets. So among other things, it has set, for instance, the CAADP, the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, which is a commitment by all the continents, the countries, to fulfill some of the targets so that they can reach the agenda of transforming ag systems. Where do we stand today? I think the question is still, and I'm not going to reveal any secrets that if I say that we're still far a bit from those targets. Only a few countries have been able to move in that agenda. So of course we can put the question, what is it that makes all these targets initiative? Well, and of course if we put it now in the 2030 agenda, that's again, it adds up because we have the SDGs. The problems are the same. I think a lot of them are well known. And if we want to focus on Africa, let me just pull a couple of, because you asked the question about the constraints. If we look forward, and this is from an exercise we did with the CGIAR a couple of years ago, looking forward to agri-food systems in 2050. So if you look in the continent, the first constraint is demography and urbanization. Because as you know, Africa now is becoming very quickly most populous continent. By 2050, we will reach 2.5 billion. And that, of course, we do have the resources. I think we will talk later on about how we can face those. That's one. The global environmental changes, climate change is a tremendous constraint. If you add into it, let me take just the example of this year. This year, the drought in the Horn of Africa is already leading to about 15 or more, according to the World Food Program, of hungry people. And here you go. So you get a problem in Ethiopia. Even in other places, North Africa, Morocco, we're facing this year one of the driest years for decades, and this is not an exception, unfortunately. So you get the demography, you get the environmental constraints, you get the food system transformation constraints as well, and you have all the policy constraints that are facing the continent. Now, if we want to simplify things, I think we've got to start bringing the solutions as well, because the problems of Africa, I would say, that are fairly well known by now, but we have to look at the potential. Potential for intensification is out there. I can mention, for instance, just one example, not to go very long. If you take the Ghanaian savanna, the Guinea savanna is something about 700 million hectares. So it's about 30% of the land in the sub-Saharan Africa. Annual rainfall is between 800 and 1,200 millimeters. Yet, only 6% of the Guinea savanna zone is cropped. And the yields, you can imagine, for maize, it's less than 2 tons. I've personally witnessed, for instance, the rice fields in the Niger Valley in Mali. It's not far from that. So here you go. We do have a potential to achieve higher yields because we have these huge yield gaps all across the continents. The question we have to ask today is, how do we get there? How do we revive this policy agenda around the Malabo and the other targets to put that back in the agenda? So I don't want to take too much of your time. I think we have experts here on water, on soil, and all those. We have to get to the nitty-gritty details. But what I would like to end up just for this first intervention is a sign of hope. I think Africa today has the tools. It has its people, it has the youth, and it has also the innovation, the disruptive innovation tools that are available today. I think we will come back to that as well in the discussion, because we do have opportunities today that were probably not available in the past. And if we involve and we open the agri-food systems to the youth in this continent and allow them to get the tools to make that happen, I think we can get there. So I would leave it there, and then hopefully we can get further
great.
discussion.
I will also
Yes.
ask another question, Dr. Rashid. Now, of course, UM6P is a young, of course, university. We just inaugurated the 5th anniversary. It was inaugurated January 2017 by His Majesty Mohammed VI. And so it's young, but full of energy, great vision. They are really great, professor and staff, attracting the best student in Africa. So it's really good. Now, my question to you, so what is really the role of UM6P and its partners? I will not say UM6P alone, because, of course, UM6P has its partners, of course, in Africa. So what their role really in helping Africa to reach this sustainable food security and sustainable agriculture, basically?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I would just slightly put it different. I would not say help in Africa, because we are part of Africa as well. Sometimes we kind of we will miss that. I think, as I mentioned, for instance, if we're talking about marginal environments and we're talking about drought, we're in the middle of it.
Yes.
So we start by helping ourselves as well.
Yes,
this is part of the equation. If we think about the problems of Moroccan agriculture facing drought today, I think it's the same problems that are faced by farmers in Kenya and Somalia and things. And that's where UM6P comes in the picture. I think to put it in our words, as I mentioned, innovation and digital agriculture, I think this is an area where the university, Mohammed VI Polytechnic, is starting with sometime what we could call business not as usual. So we're stepping out of the classic academic work. We're trying to step in a new area. This is based basically on fostering innovation, digitalization, data. And to go back to where we started on the Malabo, my personal interpretation of some of the system failures around Malabo declaration and some of those targets was that the continent is still very poor in data. And if we don't have the data today to make progress in all this area, and agriculture today is becoming based a lot on data, because we have to move into climate smart agriculture, we have to move into innovation, we have to use big data. And if we don't have, and I must say that the UM6P is really well positioned in collecting data. It has one of the biggest data centers in the continent, and it has also the skill sets around all these disciplines that are involved in agriculture, in its soils, water, and crops, as we will discuss later on. I think we have all the ingredients to be part of this equation and trying to help some of these challenges.
Thank you so much, Professor Rashid. Now I'll move to Madam Hanan Morshid from OCP. She's right now she's the Executive Director of Sustainability and Green Industrial Development at Jorf Asfar, Morocco. Over the last 15 years at the company, Hanan has held different positions in charge of the industrial plants, and recently she was appointed at this position, Sustainability and Green Industrial Development. Of course, this is in the heart of our discussion of our session today. Now, first question to you, Madam Morshid. So how does OCP really support agriculture in Africa? How do they support farmers, small farmers, and farmers in general in Africa to really increase the production and sustain, I would say, the productivity and production of their crops? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Borsini. Very happy to be part of this panel. Actually, maybe a few words about my company. OCP is the world-leading company in phosphate-based fertilizers, production and export. We are present in the 5 continents with more than 160 clients around the world, and with a special presence in Africa, as you said, by creating our subsidiary OCP Africa, fully dedicated to let's say, the conditions of our continent. We have even changed our business model and our way of doing things from the classical way that we already had among our century of existence, and our presence in Africa is quite different, because we made the commitment to be in touch with the smallholder farmer and the end of the value chain. So this required from us a lot of transformation and a lot of efforts, and we are happy about what is done today and what we intend to do. Maybe about sustainability, and especially sustainability agricultural practices. In agricultural practices, let's say that OCP is committed to sustainability in its operations, but also in its value chain, and especially helping the clients that are our end clients, that are the farmers, to implement the sustainable agricultural practices and to help through our inputs to sustain and to support this kind of practices. We are one of the rare companies around the world that is committed to carbon neutrality by 2040. We are also committed to consume only in conventional water in our operations. Today, 30% of the water that we consume is from desalination and wastewater treatments plants that we recover from urban communities and we reuse in our mines. And we intend to reach 100% in a few years. These are only figures to show that our behavior is the same wherever in the operations or at the, let's say, the support to our clients in all the value chain. In Africa, as I said, it was especially a special presence because we learned from the past and we relied on the advance of science and the new techniques and the opportunity of bringing best of us to start differently and really with a lot of innovation, etc. in Africa. So when we talk about sustainability or sustainable agriculture, definitely it should tackle the 3 components of sustainability: the environmental impact, but also the social impact and the equality and the equality of revenues, etc., at the farmer gate. So for the environmental impact, what we've done is relying on our the concept that we today use for the whole business behavior, which is the 4 R's. How to give the right nutrient for the right crop with the right amount in the right time. How to avoid giving much more nutrients than what is needed by the soil and the plants, and then getting in some environmental troubles, etc. So we started by partnering with our university. We rely a lot on the university, Mohammed VI Polytechnique, on the innovation, etc. And our products are today science-based. You know, we produce today more than 40 products instead of only 6 products 6 years before. And all these products have been developed after doing a lot of soil mapping and testing. What are the requirements of the soils? What are the requirements of these crops? Are there any special micronutrients that some soil needs? And actually we found out that there are some soils in Africa that need more sulfur than the others, some soils that need more borium. And we tried to develop sometimes even products with less of phosphorus. Even if we are the, let's say, we have the biggest reserves on phosphates on the world, this is why we are today producing phosphate-based fertilizers. But it doesn't mean that we are given more than what is needed today. It's not the philosophy of OCP. So we developed customized products, and for each part of different areas when we are operating in the African soil, we have developed new products that sometimes brought us to 40% more yield with less fertilizers. With less quantity per hectare, we reached 40% more yield. So this is, for me, a figure to show how science and innovation and responsibility could lead to best results for us and for our clients, for our farmers, for the whole chain, while being sustainable and responsible in terms of practices. Of course, I'm giving some examples of the environmental impact. We are conducting also some smart irrigation programs. We know the water scarcity issue in our country. It's not the same issue in all the African continents, but for some special places, smart irrigation is an important tool today to mitigate the hydric stress. So we have some pilot projects on this, and it could be scaled everywhere. In terms of the social impact, how to be inclusive for the farmers and for our clients. So today we developed, let's say, some specific programs like the Agri-Booster program. The Agri-Booster program is a program end-to-end, helping the farmer to grow sustainably its crops, by training the farmer on the 4R, let's say the 4R concept that I explained. What are the fertilizers that they need to use? What are the quantities, in which time, how to do it, etc. And after training, we accompany these farmers to get to the market, because if they are not able to sell their product, if there is no insurance for their crops, if they don't have enough, let's say, logistics for that, so finally, we don't have a result. So for me, sustainable agriculture is also taking into account the human being at the center of this, let's say, programs, and helping also to tackle and to have the maximum economic value and benefit from the efforts. So we have this Agri-Booster program that is helping the farmers to go to the end and to go to market. We do a lot of trainings, some special, let's say, programs for women in farming activities in Africa, and we are also part of a lot of coalitions and global efforts for, let's say, achieving minimum living wages in the value chain of the, let's say, food system, and especially the agricultural production. We work hand in hand with the IFA, the International Fertilizer Association. We work hand in hand with the World Business Council for Sustainable. We work hand in hand. Sorry, I have no more.
Back to Hanan has now the, okay.
Thank you very much. So I'll be quick. So I was talking about the Agri-Booster, etc. Maybe I was talking also about the OCP efforts to be part of global coalitions and helping, mentioning our efforts with the International Fertilizer Association, with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development as well. We've been part of a study of evaluating the true value of food. How can we evaluate again the true value of food to give the different stakeholders among the value chain of the food transformation and production the real value that they can get from their efforts. Finally, we have also some special cases where we started projects from the beginning to the go-to market with this global sustainability approach. I'm referring to the quinoa projects that we conducted in Morocco, where we used the quinoa to restore some previous soils and to grow the good species with the help and the support of the researchers of our university, Mohammed VI Polytechnic. And then some women cooperatives have been created to benefit from the economic revenue, and now they are able to package the quinoa and to sell it on markets, etc. So for me, this is what is agriculture transformation and sustainable agricultural transformation about. And maybe I can end my intervention by mentioning that today the global companies have a critical role in the food system transformation. 37% of the global GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the world, are coming from the food chain and the food systems. So we have the responsibility to act at all levels, and we've been really happy to see that OCP efforts are recognized. Today, we have the World Benchmarking Alliance that conducted an assessment among the UN Food System Summits that you mentioned for 350 companies around the world, and OCP has been ranked the 4th company most responsible in the food system transformation, and especially in the agricultural inputs. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Madam Morshid, because the last people would have the feeling or the impression that OCP sells fertilizer and that's it, and which is wrong. So that was a great explanation, really, what the organization is doing, what the company is doing. I mean, you are basically involved in the whole value chain, which is really great, targeting sustainable agriculture. That was great, Hanan. Thanks a lot. Now I'll move virtually to Professor Fasil Kebede. Professor Kebede. Yes, I see him. Your microphone probably need to be unmute. Your microphone, please. We don't hear you yet.
Hello?
Yes, now we hear you. Great. Excellent. Great to have you. Let me introduce you first, and then I will ask you a few questions, please.
Very good, very good.
Okay, Professor Fasil Kebede is a professor of soil science and program lead of the Center for Soil and Fertilizer Research in Africa. I mean, at UM6P, Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. He has more than 25 years of experience teaching, research, and leadership as well in Ethiopia. He has been engaged in conducting research in the areas of soil and fertilizer chemistry, soil phosphorus chemistry, soil micronutrient chemistry, etc. And of course, he has also held several administrative positions like Dean of Agriculture, and also he was the advisor of the Minister of Agriculture in Ethiopia. So this is why you need to answer the toughest question, Professor Fasil, since you were the advisor of the minister, and you know, of course, you're Ethiopian, and I'm sure you are very familiar with agriculture in Africa. Now, my first question to you, Professor Fasil. So what are the major soil fertility constraints that affect food and nutrition security of the African continent? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and I'm very much also delighted to be in this panel. I also want to congratulate the organizing committee for picking the right theme, which is sustainable agriculture to feed the African continent, because very timely one. So before Dr. Mustafa, I go straight answering your question, I would like to a little bit highlight about the farming.
Please go ahead.
About farming in the sub-Saharan Africa region, because it's very much critical. I did hear from the panelists again and again mentioning about food security, but it is really unrealistic to address food security ignoring soil security. So soil security is a centerpiece of food security. So before, as I have already mentioned, to directly mention or highlight the major fertility-related constraints in the region, the first problem we have. Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, yes, yes. Please go ahead. Go ahead, Fasil.
Good. Farming in the sub-Saharan Africa is dominated by smallholder farmers. That's the first thing. The other issue, there are more than 60 million smallholder farmers in the sub-Saharan Africa, which is really quite a high number. And this very number of small-scale farmers do feed 80% of the continent. And another issue probably to raise over here is farming in the sub-Saharan Africa is dominantly rain-fed, meaning it is heavily dependent on rainfall. And as you know very well, rainfall is unpredictable by its very nature. So I think it's a high time to revisit that. It's not also market-driven, which is a challenge. There is a lack of conducive economic and political enabling environment, such as there is no a genuine system for credit. The extension system is very poor, and also there are issues in relation to land ownership. Of course, low productivity is another challenge for the sub-Saharan Africa subcontinent. It's also very much prone and sensitive to soil degradation. Saying this as a background information, I can sum up in one word the major soil constraint problem in the sub-Saharan African region is soil degradation. But for the benefit of this panel, it's also very much advisable to look at the core problems. For example, soil acidification is one of the major problems, as it covers 20% of the landmass of the sub-Saharan Africa region. The other problem, which is a very serious problem, is soil drought, which covers about 60% of generally the continent's landmass. And that covers wide-ranging problems, including high temperature, moisture stress, the issue of salinity and alkalinity, and so forth. And the third one, which is really, I can say, the 100% problem of the farming systems of Africa, that is the issue of soil nutrient depletion. There are reports that
Now we lost Fasil. We are not hearing you anymore, Fasil. Fasil. No, Fasil. We are not hearing you now. You could again check your microphone, maybe, or maybe here.
Do you hear? Hello?
Yes. Go ahead now, please.
Yeah, thank you. So that's really a very huge loss. Unfortunately, the fertilizer use in the continent is also very, very low, which is about 80 kg per hectare. As you compare it with the rest of the world, it's really very, very, very small. For example, if you compare this figure with Latin America, it's about 86 kilogram per hectare. Again, if you compare this very figure with South Asia region, it's about 104. So the amount of nutrients lost from the farmlands of Africa, and on the other hand, the amount of nutrients added is really, we can't compare. It's really very, very serious. So in a nutshell, what we can say, soil degradation generally has impacted the African agriculture in this way. This time, only the sub-Saharan Africa region taps 7% of the irrigated lands potential, 14% of rainfed crop land potential, 45% of rangeland potential. These combinedly influence the really food security of the region, entirely the continent. As a result, it forced Africa to spend around $35 billion a year to import food. Therefore, it's really high time to the African governments to take advantage of considering the different initiatives so that they can handle this delicate issue without feeding the soils. And no one can feed, to be honest, the ever-growing humankind. So this is my first answer, Mustafa, to you.
Thank you, Professor Fasil. And my next question to you, Professor Fasil, are you still with me?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Yeah,
my
I'm here.
second question to you, in relation to your role now at UM6P, and I'd like to hear from you what is really the role of Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, and of course its partners, in tackling some of the soil fertility constraints in Africa. And the issues that you just mentioned really relate to soil in Africa.
Yeah, it has been addressed in one way or another form by the panelists, probably to capitalize on some of the issues. The Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, it is a world-class university, focuses more on the African and internally here, Moroccan agriculture. For example, when it comes now to soil fertility management, the university has opened a master's program in in fertilizer science and technology. This is a unique program which really incorporates different issues, starting from soil science, fertilizer science, and computer science. That really shapes the future of soil science and also agriculture in Africa, because we don't have this type of training in the rest of the African continent. The second thing is that the laboratories we have opened at the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, they are state-of-the-art laboratories which are very much instrumental to understand the behavior of the soils. Because as you know very well, prognosing and diagnosing the nature of the soils will be the springboard for soil-specific fertilizer recommendation. It has been mentioned earlier by Ms. Anane. One of the advantages in having UCP here in Africa, it is really a strategic partner in developing a customized fertilizer that can suit the different agroecological environment at the same time the crop needs. The other equally important mission of the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University is doing an applied research, which is a demand-driven research. That's very much fundamental. It also promotes interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary research where the different professionals, crop scientists, soil scientists, irrigation engineers, so on and so forth, do join arms to solve site-specific problems. For example, recently, both the university and OCP have given us opportunity to work with West African countries to address the issue of soil acidity. As I have already mentioned, aluminum toxicity is really a very serious problem in many parts of Africa. Unless and otherwise we fix this problem, in fact, it will be very, very serious for Africa still. So we have identified a very good project that will bring researchers from Ivory Coast, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, sit down around this same agenda and, of course, come up with a solution. Another good example, again, UMSXP OCP is helping a lot in addressing the issue of salinity and sodicity, for example, in Ethiopia. As I have already mentioned, more than 40% of the soils of Africa are affected by salinity and sodicity, which is again high time to correct this problem. So fortunately, there is a byproduct, which is the phosphogypsum here, a very good resource for reclaiming salinity and sodicity. So we have, again, an ongoing project where the two senior Ethiopian universities, the Haramaya University and Hausa University, are involved to solve the very problem, which is linked to salinity and alkalinity. We have also coming very many projects that will be again implemented in Eastern Africa regions, in Kenya, in Tanzania, as was again earlier mentioned by Ms. Anani. Micronutrients are a very serious problem in many parts of Africa. By the way, we can solve again human health related issues by rationally applying fertilizers. So for example, if you do fortify the major fertilizers with micronutrients like with zinc and copper boron, apparently we can still address health-related issues. So there are very many ongoing projects which are demand-driven, such specific that will revolutionize or transform agriculture in Africa. Dr. Mustafa?
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Fasil, and please stay with us because we might come back, with more questions, from the audience later on.
Okay.
As we said, during probably the last 30 minutes would be questions from the audience. Now we'll move to our colleague, Dr. Jean-Marc Forest. Jean-Marc Forest is a senior agronomist and water resources management specialist. He has more than 30 years of experience in dealing with issues related to agricultural development in the Near East, Africa, and Asia, with special focus on land and water issues, climate change adaptation, and rural livelihoods. In 2015, he joined the team in charge of developing FAO strategic program on sustainable agriculture, which is great. This is in line with what we are discussing today. Since February 2019, he is now the coordinator. Dr. Forest is the coordinator of FAO technical program in the Near East and North Africa region. Now, of course, the questions will be about water, and definitely water is, I would say, the number one natural resource treasure that we would like to preserve and use efficiently. And I personally, I've never seen a drought like what we have this year. It's everything. All the cereals basically burn like summer. It's everything is killed. Now, my first question to you, Dr. Torres, is the Malabo Declaration indicates efficient and effective water management systems, notably through irrigation, as one of the key elements for accelerating agricultural growth and doubling agricultural productivity. So what is the situation in Africa today and what should be done? Please.
Thank you.
Forest.
Thank you. You hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this very important discussion. And thank you also for starting, introducing the subject, mentioning last year's Food Systems Summit and the need to look at on the table. It is true that Africa, in particular sub-Saharan Africa, and here we have to acknowledge that Africa is indeed a very large continent with very different types of climates, but most of sub-Saharan Africa is mostly rain-fed, and we heard that also. So there is very little water management and mostly irrigation in sub-Saharan Africa if you don't consider the good management of the soil in rain-fed agriculture, which is also, in a way, when you manage your soil moisture, you manage your water. But very often, when we speak about water management, we think about agriculture. This is due to many factors, and it's not necessarily bad or a surprise that there is less irrigation in sub-Saharan Africa than, for instance, in North Africa, which is heavily dependent on irrigation. The main factor is the fact that in many places in sub-Saharan Africa you have abundant precipitations. You also, for a long time, had relatively low population density, so the need for intensifying was not necessarily there. But there was also other elements, and for too long, and that was really the purpose of the Malabo Declaration, for too long agriculture has been not considered sufficiently. Investing in agriculture, in particular in terms of national and public policies, is systematically less in percentage than what agriculture represents in a country's GDP. So agriculture doesn't even receive the same amount of investment compared to what it contributes to the national economy. And that has lasted for a long time, and this is one of the reasons why the Malabo Declaration indicates the importance of investing in agriculture. But things are changing really fast. We see booming population. We see more and more areas in sub-Saharan Africa where the population growth, the pressure on the land, the need to feed growing cities means that you need to intensify your productivity, your agricultural production. And we heard from the first speaker how low our yields are still today in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's really important to focus on the different elements that allow this intensification. And certainly here we have an interesting discussion because the soil fertility, the whole ensuring that you bring the right nutrients to the plant and the water are two very complementary elements. If you bring one and not the other, you will get very, very little increase. And the same in both directions. So there is really a win-win situation in managing soil fertility and at the same time managing water. There have been many issues. I think partly in many countries there was an attempt to apply models of irrigation that were not adapted to the situation. We heard that most of African farmers are very small-scale farmers. They lack skills, they lack knowledge, they also lack access to finance, to inputs, to many things. And applying relatively complex systems of irrigation that we have seen trying to adopt in many places has not had the results that were expected because it put people who didn't have particularly developed skills in front of very complex systems. And one of the issues, in particular when you deal with water management and in irrigation, is that you force people to manage together a resource. It's not anymore my little plot which I can manage, I can decide how I manage it. Now we have to be several of us managing resources. If the guy upstream doesn't manage his water well, I will not get it on time, or I will get too little or too much at the same time. So there is a dimension of jointly managing water that is a major issue. And I think one element of solution is to really obviously increase the capacities of farmers, but it's also developing systems that are really adapted to, in particular, to these so many small-scale farmers. And that means robustness and simplicity, not having to rely on 2,000 people sharing the same resource, maybe being able to manage my resource myself. That really simplifies things and makes farmers more able to manage their resource. There are many, many things and many, many conditions for that, but I think I'll stop here and maybe.
Okay. But I still have another question for you, Dr. Forrest. Can you give us examples of successful water management systems in sub-Saharan Africa, and what makes them successful? That's what really we need. That's what we need people to hear, so that they follow these examples, successful examples. Please go ahead, Dr. Forrest.
Thank you. And I think this is a very good transition because I was just starting to speak about that. We have many examples of successfully boosting productivity. And it is true that when you do provide access to water, you do allow producers to produce much more, to produce much better, to diversify, to produce in several seasons. There are plenty of reasons why better managing water offers great opportunities to increase productivity. Let me just give you an example of a very small project, but it shows you what not to do and what to do. So this project was a project to develop vegetable gardening near a city. And it was designed, very well designed by irrigation engineers who, there was a well, water was pumped and distributed in canals, and this was given to women to grow vegetables. And you know that around cities or growing cities, growing fresh products is really a great opportunity, and it will grow more and more. So the design was such that water was going to be pumped from that hour to that hour, and there were hundreds of women cropping their plot, their very small plot of land, and they were given a time schedule. So you should irrigate from 10 to 10:15, you from 10:15 to 10:30, etc., etc. And that was the design. And it never worked. They were not there on the right time. This was the time to bring children to school. One was late, the other one was sick. And it was a disaster because then all this system where everybody was connected and depended on each other almost was collapsing. And then the producers themselves said, why don't you give us some basins, some reservoirs? You just put the water in the reservoirs and we will take that water and we will use that water when we need it and when we have the time to do it. And so first the engineers said, well, this is a waste of energy, this is a waste of space, you need the reservoir, this is not efficient, this is not effective. Well, it was maybe not as efficient as what was designed, but it was much more effective. After they developed their reservoirs, they could manage the water the way they wanted, and that irrigation scheme became very productive. So sometimes with an example, you can explain how to improve situation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Forrest. Now we'll move to Dr. Aziz Nian. And he's a seed scientist, technologist, and rangeland ecologist. He's now the ICARDA Arabian Peninsula Regional Program, based here in, of course, United Arab Emirates. Of course, has, say, about 30 years or so of experience on seed science and technology, seed system analysis, rangeland monitoring, restoration, management in North Africa, West and Central Asia. So he's still, even though I think he's here, he still manages the ICARDA International Nurseries. He's still coordinates a big Iran ICARDA food security project. And as I said, since 2020, he has become the coordinator of the ICARDA Arabian Peninsula Regional Program. ICARDA is the International Center for Agricultural Research in the dry areas. A question to you, Dr. Aziz. You know that there are several national research institutions, regional, international, that work on breeding or to develop varieties, new varieties. These varieties could be, of course, high yielders, could be resistant to diseases, insects, etc., good quality. But sometimes there is low adoption by farmers of these new varieties. So I wonder what, and this is common across, everybody talks about it, their national programs, CGIAR centers, etc. So what are really some of the, I would say, the problems or the constraints that are limiting adoption of varieties by farmers? Please go ahead, Dr. Nian.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. Yes, it is a subject that is very close to my heart. I can say that the way I interpret the Malabo Declaration was the need to move from subsistence to more business-oriented agriculture. Agriculture is a business. When we say business, it has to make a difference for the producers, for the consumers, for the transformers. So moving from subsistence agriculture to more business-oriented, we have to address two issues. The incremental is the increase of productivity and yield. We have to also address the issue of transformation. We have so many examples in these two angles. Some countries were advised that, look, if you want to really to bring prosperity and whatsoever, you need to have much more productive varieties. One example, one country invited Monsanto's to bring their high-yielding maize varieties. They brought it. They addressed the incremental dimension. The farmers planted these high-yielding maize varieties. After harvest, some farmers took the seed to the market to sell it. They left it there and come back because they didn't want to pay the transportation.
Wow.
Because if you produce a lot of maize, you need to have a chicken industry that is going to feed. You need to have oil industry that is going to feed. You need to have a livestock industry that is going to feed. So the incremental dimension was addressed, but the transformation was not addressed. So if we come to seed, definitely, like agriculture, as I said, is a business. In any business, we can represent it in a triangle. A research to generate new innovations and technology. Technology promotion and transfer. And you go to the consumer angle. Now, be it plant, be it animals, you need innovations, which means generating new innovation, which is varieties. Varieties are a package. They are not only the genetic. It is a package. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because a variety, be it a plant or be it an animal, it is an entity into which traits were incorporated to overcome constraints in the environment, in the market, and so forth. If you take now just that variety of plant, of that variety of chicken, that variety of animal, and then give it to a farmer without the other components of the package, is not going to harvest the benefits.
Good point.
We were studying adoption and impact, for example, of wheat in Morocco. We found that the lack of adoption, access to seed contributed only 16%. The rest was other factors. And now when we are now presenting seed to the farmers as just a high-yielding variety, And the farmer doesn't have mechanization, doesn't have inputs, doesn't have water, doesn't have market. Because I'm releasing a variety which is high gluten, but my consumer doesn't care about gluten at all. I have an example of a country, I don't want to make the name, but if it's general, they will go to the farmers who are producing seeds. They will ask them to rock the variety 25 times, to irrigate it. And then the inspector will come and inspect the field, reject 50% of it, and buy variety 1 and 2 and 3. And then when they come to the silo, those were 3 varieties, they put them together.
Interesting.
Okay, because the grain market, which is buying the variety, doesn't say, okay, this variety is for cookies, this is for biscuit, this is for baguette, and this is for bread. That grading system doesn't exist. In such cases, you have a market, very well-targeted market, where the farmer said, I'm going to grow this variety, I'm going to invest in it because it has higher price in the market. But the grading, it doesn't exist. So to cut a long story short, yes, the low adoption is there because definitely if we go across the value chain, we don't really find this justification for a farmer to invest in purchasing certified seed and investing inputs, because at the end of the day, the market doesn't pay for the additional expenses he's incurring. Now, when I compare this, for example, with the seed companies who are more profit-oriented. Profit is not an evil. Is it good to do something which is profitable? But when we say, okay, private companies, they say, oh, no, they are only worried about profitability. Profitability is not an evil, okay? It is even good. So they have more demand-oriented system. They are producing for demand. If you go to the public sector, they are more supply-oriented. For example, they don't look at what we call effective demand. In some countries, will tell you that, okay, I wanted to provide certified seed, for example, for 60% of the farmers. This is the total demand, but it's not effective demand. You produce and nobody will come and pick it because they don't want to pay for certified seed that is not going to generate income for them. So if we don't look at effective demand and look at variety as a package, that is why the low adoption and impact on investment in agriculture, especially in variety development, is coming from. I mean, this applies also in the livestock. If you go and now, for example, people invest a lot in livestock, and they get the milk, they don't have the transportation and cooling system to bring it to the market before it gets spoiled. So we have to look into variety, let it be livestock or plant. We have to look into it in a holistic manner. I mean, in a transformation and not only in the incremental dimension.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aziz. Basically, we need to look at the whole value chain. I think everybody would agree with you. Yeah. And this is exactly what that food summit and it was about, food system and transformation they talked about. Basically, this is it. Yeah. Now, a question to, of course, Dr. Manal. In 2015, she co-founded a small company called Amandi Foods that assists farmers in quinoa production and design quinoa-based recipes. This is basically in Morocco, of course. Anyhow, I will have 2 questions for you. The first one, we know the world is dominated, this is a reality, by few staple crops, such as wheat, corn, rice, accounting for an estimated 2.5%, basically about 43% of the world calorie supply. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we should stop investing on these crops. I'm just saying that pose the following question. How can crop diversification and biodiversity play a role really rich in food and nutritional security? Okay, while of course maintaining, I'm not, again, people should not understand me wrongly. I'm not saying that we should stop investing on wheat and corn and rice, but they are the dominated crops. Should we go diversify? Should we introduce other crops? And why? Go ahead, please, Dr. Manar.
Thank you, Professor Bouhsini. Thank you for the audience and also for the panelists. Very pleased to be with you at this expo. And also, I want to remind that being a researcher and an entrepreneur is not something bad. It's something that we encourage at our institution, Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. This helps us to take the research from the lab to test it in our living labs, which are the experimental farm, the mine sites, and also we consider that the city where we are implemented is also a living lab to the farmer and to scale it up to other cities and other continents. So to answer to your question related to the role of biodiversity, or should we maintain or stop diversifying, for sure, we encourage everyone to diversify in everything. So diversity is a richness, is power in food, in culture, in music, everything. So for my angle of sights, the role of biodiversity, I can split it to three major roles. The first one is related to the plants, the second to the consumer, the third related to the farmer. So for the plants, it's happened that many underutilized or neglected crops, they are resistant, or we can say they are tolerant to many stresses. We can list here drought. Also, they have the ability to have an early maturity. They are tolerant to salinity and also low soil fertility. I can here list some crops like finger millet and fonio and quinoa that turns from orphan, or I can say neglected crops, to well-known crops in many countries in the world. So this diversification is gaining a lot of interest from many investors and researchers, and this will help us to diversify not only our food systems and increase our ability to climate change, but this will help us also to diversify feeding animal foods. So the second pillar is of the role of biodiversity is to afford diversified and nutritional foods for consumers. So maybe numbers, they speak more than words. So we have more than 6,000 species that we can consume, and also we have also 70,000 species that we can consume that are safe and nutritious. But unfortunately, we focus a lot on three major crops that produce more than half of our calories, and from those three, they belong to 20 commodities that grow in more than 80% of agricultural land. And the problem of those 20 commodities is that they are vulnerable to climate change. That makes the consumer vulnerable, and also the farmer. So relying on only three crops, imagine that like this year we have very drought season in Morocco, relying on only wheat, that's a very bad scenario. So that brings me to the third role, which is farmer. So one of the role of biodiversity is to improve the livelihood of rural people. That will help. It will help us to maintain their land, to diversify their incomes, and also it will help us to use their local know-how. So here maybe we have like three action points that maybe we need to focus on, mainly related to biodiversity. It needs more exploration. We need to assess this diversity. So we have the exploration. Second is the conservation of this biodiversity, and then its valorization, to take it from the seed banks and the lab to the markets. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. It's a quick second question, but quick. We need to save some time for our audience, either attending virtually or here with us. You are, as a young scientist at UM6B, and of course with an entrepreneurial mindset, how do you see the role of entrepreneurship in helping really farmers in Africa, or transfer resource to farmers? And can you please give me some examples so that we learn from?
Well, here I will not just report data or report stories from papers I read, but this is story I lived. This is my something I lived, and something I learned is that entrepreneurship is one of the key to take the key to help to help agriculture in Africa and all over the world, and it will help to take small or neglected species from its own area, to take it to larger area, and it will help it to be well known in other areas. For example, here, in the 1975, who used to know about quinoa? Now I can say, thanks to research and communication, we start hearing, everyone knows about quinoa. So and this is the case for other crops. So entrepreneurship is one of the key. It can take, like, if each African leader, student, farmer can take its, we can say, species, local species, or variety, or genetic resources, can take it, which is for sure, which is resilient to some extreme environments, and can use his local know-how, can help if those entrepreneurs can find the right skills, they can be very empowered to take those crops to the market, not only local markets, but to the international markets. So we have many examples. We have the quinoa, that small projects that we launched on 2015 with my colleagues in Morocco. We assist farmers to produce quinoa. Then we turned to our quinoa is not originated from Morocco, but we turned to our traditions to get resource, to know to adapt some recipes, local recipes to quinoa. And also the examples are very we have many examples, like fonio in USA by the Yoli Yoli company, and also for moringa, like there is a company also in USA called Kuli Kuli, and it's very inspiring for young entrepreneur in Africa. So maybe here what a call to action that we have is to invite not only entrepreneurs to turn their ideas into action, but also to universities and local governments to empower those rural youth and also women to build their companies.
Great, Manal. It's a good to talk. I mean, to end our first round, I would say, of questions with this entrepreneurship mind. so that really we help, we transfer basically the knowledge to farmers and help them. Now I'll turn to our audience here for if they have questions, and then I do have questions that I've received from the chat. I will, if you have questions, please, wait. So we have about 25 minutes if you have questions. If not, I will open the questions I received. Have a question, please. So let me start with this. Dr. Rashid, what role education could play to develop a sustainable agricultural food system in Africa?
Yeah, big question, but also very relevant. I want just to use this to go back where we started. And actually, we're talking about a transformation agenda in Africa. I think this is big. And it has been said also as moving from subsistence to agriculture as a business. So transformation and putting agri-food systems in the center of development in the country. There are 5 drivers to this, policy drivers to this. First one is institutions. You have to get the institutions that were and make the commitments and push the agenda. Second is knowledge and technology. That's your question. Without new knowledge, and right now, I think the good news to end up in a more optimistic view, we are going through a real digital revolution. Knowledge is out there, but there is also a gap because knowledge does not reach always on time those who need it the most. Because we have this dilemma in Africa, as in our region as well. 80% of the farmers or of the farming systems are smallholders, small-scale farmers. And those, unfortunately, do not always get access. And that is our role, basically. When you put the question of education, I would enlarge it to put in a framing of access to technology and knowledge. And that's where the third one, so I mentioned 2 now, the third one is infrastructure. Because to get, for instance, digitalization, to get the access to the internet, to the 5G, you still have remote areas who hardly get access to that. And if you come to Africa, you'd see now there is progress happening. There are reports recently by the World Bank showing that progress is happening, but there is still a lot to be done about infrastructure. Human capacity and capacity building in general to make those drivers of the policy to move forward. And I think that's, again, related to education. I think the own existence of academic institutions is to help with capacity. We're not just training students, but we're building the continent capacity to deal with those other drivers. And finally, one of the most important, and it has been mentioned by Aziz in his introduction, is trade and markets. And we've heard a lot about that because you can produce all the commodities you want, you can make all the innovation you want, but if you have not developed the markets for it, and the Malabo Declaration, you would see that one of the key targets was basically to double, I think, that's the continental trade. It's still kind of work in progress, but those are the 5 elements, and I think education relates to all of them, and there are some signs of hope, I would say, on all this, especially given the ongoing revolution in innovation and agripreneurship and all this.
Excellent. It's good to hear there is hope. That's very important. Hanan, there is a related question here about extension, the role of extension that could, extension plays an important role in disseminating technologies to farmers. But unfortunately, the extension system in Africa in general is low, is weak. So, and then, of course, I know OCP is really working a lot with farmers. It was really good to hear. Of course, we have excellent connection in Africa. I know that you have OCP Africa, you have, a lot, so you are in different countries. So how do you see the role in really working with farmers, with disseminating technology to farmers, help them really increase their productivity, production, and, basically have reached this sustainable agriculture and food security?
Well, thank you for the question. I think the experience of OCP Africa showed that the scale-up is possible, the extension is possible. We started by piloting, testing, doing some innovation located in some areas, and today the approach is, let's say, embraced in all the African continent. I think it's very important to start from this point and to see this proof of concept. The debottlenecking is a long process. You know, there are some specificities for the African continent about, we talked about the access to markets, but also the logistics, how to ensure that the inputs are really, let's say, able to accessed by all the farmers. Actually, we had to work on railroads, we have to launch new areas of storage, we have to launch new blenders in different areas, we have to partner with the local governments, NGOs, etc., to make sure that these bottlenecks are tackled and the work is still ongoing. I think there are a lot of efforts. Partnership is very important. Partnership for Goals is the 17th SDG. It makes it, let's say, the basis of achieving all the other SDGs. It's very important. And I think that today the efforts about continuing science, all the wonderful work presented by the different panelists, showing how innovation could be a real game changer. I'm thinking about the orphan crops that Manel mentioned, all the research about the forgotten crops, how these forgotten crops could become a real opportunity to intensify, to create new businesses, new opportunity of economic growth. This is also important, and OCP is really the first, let's say, client for this research that the university is conducting and for the African continent. I'm also thinking about some other opportunities, like all the discussion ongoing about making agriculture the biggest sink hole of carbon in the world. You know, this is very important.
An excellent point, yeah.
All the carbon farming practices that are today becoming a necessity to achieve the global neutrality objectives. So without, let's say, intensifying research and starting by piloting, etc., on the ground, we will never be on time for the scale that is needed about the subject. And I think OCP is I'm not thinking, I'm today, let's say, sharing the information that OCP is making this carbon neutrality and target one of its most important targets, and we will never achieve our 2040 neutral objective without working on our indirect emissions, the scope 3 of our emissions. More than 70% of our emissions are coming from the agricultural practices and our inputs at the farmer gate. So definitely this necessity of implementing regenerative agriculture, practices that improve the topsoil while capturing carbon in the soil, etc., are a need for us to achieve our commitment to neutrality. And this is an opportunity for the African farmer to be an actor of this and even to increase its benefits from this new trends and new needs of the global community by monetizing his new practices to achieve the maximum capture of carbon in soils. So these are only some clear cases that could really make the case of a more let's say, profitable and sustainable agriculture in Africa.
Excellent, Hanan. Now, a question relates to climate change. And of course, other panel members, if you want to really participate in any of the questions, please let me know and then go ahead. Monitoring the time, of course, we'll finish on time. I will give you, of course, before we close, 1 minute each for closing remarks for each panel member, so that will come shortly. Now, question related to climate change for you, Dr. Forrest. climate change is one of the main challenges for African agriculture. Now, what is the connection with water? What should be done to adapt African agriculture to climate change? It's a big question, but please.
In a few seconds. Thank you. Yes, it's a very big question. And for so long, we have been focusing on mitigation, and that was all related to energy. And definitely, this is true. But some people say mitigation is to energy like adaptation is to water, because practically all the effects of climate change, in particular in agriculture, relate in a way or another with water. The acceleration of the water cycle, the more variable precipitation, the longer or the more intense droughts, and you mentioned some, the fact that simply an increase in temperature means an increase in evaporation and evapotranspiration. Everything is connected with water. So yes, a continent that has not much irrigation, that relies a lot on rain-fed agriculture is very sensitive. I would add that a lot of areas in sub-Saharan Africa have very poor soils, and they have difficulties in maintaining the soil moisture, and therefore are very sensitive to drought in particular. There are many things to do, of course, better understanding what is happening, predicting better the climate and in particular the periods of droughts or intense precipitation. There is absolutely a need to better manage water, the little water that's available there. It's whether there is or there is no climate change, there is really a big effort to make in better managing water, wasting it less. And then there is the whole package of agriculture systems. I think we heard from all of us how things are connected. And here we can start from the varieties, the drought-resistant crops, of course. Sometimes being able to predict and to anticipate the fact that some areas you'll have to change your crops. And then the whole issue related to protecting farmers, including through insurances, for instance, climate insurances. This is a kind of building resilience that allows farmers to take a little bit more risk, because they know that if this is a very bad year, somebody will compensate them in a way or another. So I see a lot of future also in many different forms of climate insurance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Forrest. Anybody wants to add? Please let me know. But last question from the audience is, so we talk about food security, nutritional security. What's about food safety? Food safety, yeah, because the three to me should be interlinked. Cannot talk about only food security, quantity basically. Now we are adding the nutritional quality. Injecting some of the crops, diversifying the cropping system basically, and having some nutritious food. But what about safety? Because a lot of farmers, I would say, everywhere, especially in Africa, they do use quite a bit of fungicide, insecticide, and there are a lot of residues, etc. So anybody wants to talk about that?
Maybe you're the best to answer that question.
Well, anyhow, this is in the heart, really, of my heart, basically. I'm one of those that really push for the three things, food security, nutritional security, and safety, because, unfortunately, a lot of, farmers do use pesticide. They're not aware of the problem related. I'm not saying don't use pesticide, but use them, whenever they are needed. Okay, otherwise use other alternatives. Okay. There are a lot of alternative methods. Aziz was talking about varieties. There could be varieties resistant to pests and diseases. There are cultural practices, planting date, fertilization could help. If you have vigor of the plants that would tolerate the disease and insect, etc. So use pesticide whenever needed, and then of course make sure that farmers do respect when to harvest, the vegetables or fruit. That's also a challenge. And so, in my opinion, we need to do a lot of dissemination, a lot of education, I would say, a lot of extension to really, so that farmers are aware of the heavy use of pesticide and the implications they have on residues, etc. So probably I would stop here, and then, unless anybody wants to jump in, ahlan wa sahlan. But let me give you the floor now to 1 minute each, just to give me some concluding really remarks of this session. Professor Rashid Suresh.
Yeah, thank you, Sir Mustafa. I just want to conclude by putting all these conclusions, the discussions in the context of research. Because especially having this initiative being taken by an academic institution, implicitly what we mean is this is really the space and the need for research for development. So what can research contribute? Because we are asking a question, big question, about the issues of agriculture and sustainable agriculture and food production in the continent. I think we have to keep in mind the role of innovation and research. It has been said, but I think we have to emphasize especially the role of transdisciplinary research. We cannot cut it in pieces. We cannot have it in silos. We need a framework that brings all of it together. That means soil, water, crops, fish, livestock. Unfortunately, today we didn't have maybe enough time to go through all those. But we have to look at the agri-food system as a whole. And I think this is, if there is a message that we got from last year discussion on agri-food systems and food system summit, is this one, is that we can no more have the luxury of separating all this in pieces, but we have to have that thinking across. The second one I would like to make is if we think about the challenges, and as I said, we are part of Africa, we live the problems of Africa, and this year we talked about drought. So you have all this potential that I mentioned earlier, the Ghanaian savanna, where you have this huge potential that it could be basically the food baskets of the continent, where you can go for intensification. Yet you also have the marginal areas. You have the Sahel region. You have large areas in the continents where farmers are struggling in marginal areas. So this is, I think, again, a key issue we need to pay attention to. We cannot only look at the food baskets and the potential intensification, but we have also to keep an eye on marginal areas. I can only see the Icarda here, but also beyond that, across the continent. I think we have to keep this. And finally, I would put it in one sentence. It's not mine. It has been said already. We say always that think globally, but act locally. I think most of our action today, starting from North Africa and going to the continent, goes through this framework of bringing agri-food system transformation and transdisciplinarity. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Rashid. Now, Madam.
Yeah, I will be very short. For me, based on all the very interesting debate that we had, and as a business representative, I'm saying that business have today, more than ever, a critical role to support the food system transformation and to provide sustainable agricultural systems that are able to feed the world and to ensure food security for the growing population. This is a very challenging thing as well, while respecting the planetary boundaries, means the environment, the impacts, and even turning this system to a way to mitigate and to adapt to the global crisis. The two biggest crises that we're facing today are the climate change and the biodiversity loss. So the agricultural system is definitely, for me, an opportunity if it's transformed to tackle these both crises. And it should be human-centric, inclusive for communities, based on science and research, and with disruptive approaches, thinking out of the box.
Excellent. From research, because we need research.
Absolutely.
All the way to throughout, looking at the whole value chain, basically, and everything. And that's that the food system, basically, transformation was needed. Dr. Forrest, please.
Thank you. Let me just focus on one point. There are so many things to say. I would like to stress the absolute necessity of working more and more in partnership. I think it is very clear that everything we want, if we want to achieve sustainable agriculture, which is, as we have seen, a very complex issue, this is really not the issue for governments or for research or for farmers or for private sector. It's the issue for everybody. And we will not manage to do it if we don't develop further these partnerships. I'm very pleased to see some of the representatives of different stakeholders around this table, not all of them, but many. And I think this is an example of how, by looking at a common vision and a common objective and bringing the different skills and capacities of different groups of people, then we can achieve sustainable agriculture. But partnership is certainly a key element of this.
That's excellent, Dr. Forrest, because that's partnership. That's all related, basically, to what you are saying. We need to look at the whole system, not really single out any commodity or anything. Dr. Aziz Nian, please.
Thank you, Mustafa. Talking about food security, we are talking about availability, accessibility, and affordability, which is very important. For health, which is a problem in Africa. But let us not forget also the dimension of creating wealth. Not only filling the stomach, we need also to create wealth. This is very important for the youth who is coming and finding no job market, and thousands of them are trying to cross the Atlantic Ocean to go to Europe because they don't have opportunities or future. So not only filling the stomachs, let us also think about creating wealth.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Let me see whether Professor Fasil is still with us.
Yeah, you.
Professor Fasil? Professor Fasil?
Probably not.
I don't know whether he's still with us or no. Probably not. Oh, he's here. If you have some concluding remark, Professor Fasil, we're concluding our session. If you have just some, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. For me, I think the centerpiece for sustainable agriculture is improving soil fertility. That is a fundamental issue. So what do I mean when I say that? For example, Ms. Anane and others have mentioned about carbon sequestration. We can enhance the carbon sequestration potential of the soil as long as we do improve the soil fertility status. That's number one. Number two, it has been also addressed the issue of soil moisture retention. This is again, in one way or another, related with the enhancement of soil fertility. The third issue, as I just mentioned earlier, nutrient depletion is a key problem in the Sub-Saharan Africa region. Therefore, we have to invest a lot in redressing. Here, in this way and that way, for different reasons, little attention was given for soil fertility management. Therefore, for Africans, particularly for the Sub-Saharan Africa subcontinent, I do recommend seriously, really, to invest a lot in soil research. That's really very, very basic. We don't know critically our soils systematically, meaning I know there are some countries which have tried to map their soils. By the way, Mohammed VI Polytechnic University is now becoming an authority when it comes to digital soil mapping. Therefore, this may be collaboration in the future with the rest of our colleagues in the Sub-Saharan Africa region will help a lot in understanding, particularly in the systematic understanding of the soils of that region, because be it fertilizer recommendation, climate change abatement, and so forth are in one way or another associated with mapping or with knowing of the soils. Therefore, it's really critical to invest or to be willing in soil research investment, not only soil research investment, but also in soil infrastructure development. That is very, very mandatory. For example, OCP Africa, through its foundation program, one of an exemplary thing probably to mention is it works hard to capacitate the capacity of the many smallholder African countries in understanding their soils in a better way. Therefore, there has to be a kind of a science-based approach for sustainable development. This is briefly what I would like to
Thank you so much, Professor.
summarize.
Thank you so much, Professor Fasil. Manal, you have some concluding remarks?
Yes, I would like to conclude by a call to researchers to give much more interest to neglected and underutilized crops, and also a second call to investors and funders to fund more research on that, and for investors to invest in communication around those crops. And my last call to entrepreneurs to turn their ideas into action, because opportunities they are presented to prepared mind and also prepared and ready business models. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent, Manal. Yeah, last word from
just a
the
couple,
panel member from
just
Dr.
a couple seconds.
Yeah, please,
thank
please
you.
go ahead.
Yeah, just to announce an event that's happening tomorrow. So those of you who are here, because it is about research. So this is not the end. Yes. Maybe we're starting another conversation tomorrow with Jean-Marc moderating and others, but it will have the focus on North Africa. So I invite some of you, and it's in the DEC. Thank you.
Excellent, Dr. Rashid. Anyhow, at the end, I have personally enjoyed very much really the interaction with great panel members. I personally enjoyed that very much. And I hope those that attended here did enjoy that. Of course, also those that attended virtually. So on behalf of our audience and the organizers, UM6P and OCP, that organized this very important session, I would like to thank you. I would thank our panel members first, and thank you, of course, for joining us. Again, this is one of the discussions happening this week. It's not really the first or the last, but a lot of sessions are happening these days. And so last sentence, let's work together to achieve this really noble goal of sustainable agriculture to feed the African continent. Look, we need to look at the whole system. I mean, let me just react quickly. When I heard soil health, I really like this, what they call One Health initiative. Looking at soil health, plant health, animal health, human health. If you examine this, it is the whole everything, see? And that's really where we should be going, so that we really achieve, look at the whole system, food system, if we want really to achieve the sustainable agriculture in Africa and somewhere else. Have a safe trip back home for those that are traveling, of course, like us tomorrow. And thank you so much again.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.